Hello, my name is Daniel J, and this is my Civic Mirror personal reflection. The Civic Mirror allowed me to learn a lot of things about myself and how society works. It allowed me to learn how people are dependent on other people for things, and how you can't get along with life by yourself. It also helped me learn about how our current government works and how the system works. Yeah. So for a quick recap, in the year 2000, the Civic Mirror started with the hex auction. The hex auction was interesting because it sort of showed who in the class had a strategy and who didn't. For example, about these units from here up went for a very high price. They sold for 1,000 to 2,000 for the houses, sometimes even 3 for the mansions. Um, the trees sold anywhere from 1,500 to 750, and the healthcare and those were extremely expensive. But after a while, down here, people started to run out of money. So people would save their money for this sort of block of industrial or unit producing hexes, sort of had free reign over them and were able to get more or less whatever they wanted. My strategy was to get the food hex. Unfortunately, it was a little bit harder because the government put a restriction on both the food hex and the EI hex, saying that nobody could bid on them, and that only the government could. So they automatically got those. At the end of the trading season, I was happy. I had my food hex, and I had very little debt to Jake. I think it was only about $1,000. So I could pay that off easily the next year. Um, so 2001 or 2000, the trading season was extremely hectic. It Nobody really knew what they were doing. We only ran the practice once, and it was still little bit foggy for some people. So as you can see, there are quite a few deaths this year. Most of them are from food and homelessness. The food deaths shouldn't have happened at all, in my opinion. I know for a fact that there is enough food for everyone in our class, and there is actually one extra food. So I know that all of my food was traded out, leaving only the government to blame. So I think the government definitely could have been on the ball a bit better and got people who needed the food. In the court year, or in not the court year, the discussion, the town hall, we discussed a lot of things, mostly revolving around the food and what happened with it and how come people didn't get it. Um, I think that we came to a conclusion that everything was too expensive and that there should be prices set on them. So in 2000, the main, um, I guess, court case was between me and the government, in my opinion. Um, it was for the government putting a restriction on what hex you could bid on, because in the mobility rights it stated that we were allowed to live and make a living on any hex, and their law prevented this. Um, I thought that I made a strong argument, but unfortunately the government was proving not guilty by the jury. The next year, the government happened, and they added their income tax, their national well-being and equal opportunity laws. This was kind of frustrating for me because of my hidden agenda, which was um, racial superiority. So I had to get the minorities to the bottom. That is why I picked up the food tax. It was so that I could discriminate and not give them food, damaging how they did in that year and possibly putting them in the bottom. This basically canceled that plan. I was not allowed to deny trading rights based on race, religion, sex, or political orientation. That was frustrating. It definitely put a hold on my plans. And then the next big thing was when they put the restrictions on the price of how much units could be sold. Because my backup plan was to simply jack the prices up until they couldn't afford them. Um, I guess the trading year of 2001 went a little smoother. Well, somewhat smoother, because I managed to get very frustrated with the government on the price cap that they put on food, which was only $500. I felt very strongly that it was way too low and went on strike. I decided not to sell food to anyone except for myself. So I ate all the food units I could, and basically withheld them from the class. Obviously, the class didn't like this too much. They immediately freaked, like had an uproar, and I managed to get legislated back in, which was unfortunate, and in the end, it came to my hex being taken away due to failure to complete trades for various reasons. I think one thing I learned was that strikes just don't work like that. You just don't learn. You just don't decide that you go on strike. Um, One way that I can relate it back to class material was the action plan, the political action plan. If I had created a political action plan for my situation, I think that it would have gone over much better, and it would have ended more favorably. Um, so a lot of that year revolved around the strike. Pretty much everything did. Court rulings even. So in court that year, there was this one. Rihanna Wise and Alana sued me, and I was guilty and the farm was taken away from me and was controlled by the government. I felt very unfair about this because I wasn't there that day, and I was not allowed to represent myself in court, which I felt broke the Constitution. But there wasn't very much I could do about it, so I had to more or less suck it up and go along with it. The next and final year was extremely interesting as our government decided to go far, far, far left. Communist left. Like, they decided to create a dictatorship. Um, our class didn't take that very well, and everybody retaliated against the dictatorship because, in general, it's a bad word. But I think that a lot of people reacted too soon, and from stereotypes, I think a lot of people would have liked what happened. They had a good, from what I heard, it was all about trying to make sure everybody survived and everybody had what they needed. So the next day after government session, there were a lot of scary words thrown around. The main one was crisis vote. Everybody wanted to have a crisis vote against this dictatorship. So what ended up happening was the government decided that they would switch back to a democracy. In fact, a better democracy. They would create a direct democracy where the people would vote on the laws, not elected party officials. So I personally really like this because it gave the people more say in what the government was doing. So if I didn't like a law, I could say I didn't like it. I guess, yeah. One interesting thing was that before it got switched back, the government took all of the hexes away from it, all of the business owners, all the business hexes away, and all of the money. So the business hexes didn't get returned, and everybody ended up in the same spot that I was last year, or that I was going to be in this year. So my court case last year really didn't end up doing anything. It just put me where everybody else was this year, a little bit faster. So I didn't mind that. I was like sort of grinning and smiling, going, heh heh heh, payback. Um, yeah, I guess the next major event was the trading season. The trading season went rather rough, in my opinion, because what they were trying to do is they were creating a more or less socialist, far left trading way. So pretty much the government owned everything, and what they decided to do was accept trades to the government. So you'd send your trade to the government with one unit. One unit. You could only choose one, or else it would be rejected. And the price cap. So let's say it was food, it would be $500. and you'd submit that trade to the government. Now, what ended up happening was there was a limit on the trades that the government could receive. There was 15. So what I ended up doing, and what I think a couple people ended up doing, was sitting there with this open. It wouldn't have looked like this because there would have been 15 trades in the government. It would have said too many trades, and we just hit refresh over and over again until we got this page and sent a trade. So I managed to get about 3 or 4 trades in a row and got everything that I needed. I had 2 food, I had 2 education, I had a security. I was set. I didn't have that many well-being points though, because I didn't have very many luxuries and not very much money. So if I had more money, I would have been able to get more luxuries. Um, my suggestion for this was to create a more strict guideline for buying food. Like you would have a form and you'd write what you needed for the year. And then you would write what you wanted. And then you would write how much money you had available that year. And the government would then sort through all of the piles. They wouldn't do it in order. They would sort through and be like, okay, this is reasonable. And they would send trades to people for what they thought was reasonable and a reasonable compromise or exactly what they wanted. Yeah, and that was the end of our civic mirror. We had one court day, and I don't believe anybody got sued. There was a couple sort of messing around court cases, but all of them were found not guilty. So overall in the civic mirror, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I tend to make rash decisions and jump into things, as shown by the food strike. It wasn't the smartest thing, and if I thought it through longer, I would have done a lot better. I also learned that communication is vital. I didn't communicate enough with people. I didn't make enough alliances. If I had more alliances, it would have been much easier to secure my hidden agenda goal. Like I said before, my hidden agenda goal was to have all of the minorities in the bottom of the well-being points. My idea to do this was to create a communist government that strictly regulated everything and just have all of the minorities one status point below everybody else, so that it would be somewhat it wouldn't be very significant and people might not notice it for the first year or two. The hard part, of course, was establishing the communist government. Luckily, they did that for me in the last year, so I felt that was a step in the right direction, but it was too late because of what I'd done with the food strike. Nobody would elect me to government. My major strengths and weaknesses were what I said, communication and rashness, and in ways that this prepared me for the real world. Well, it allowed me to see what it was like out there. It allowed me to understand how competitive and how cutthroat it is, and how if you don't try to get to the top, you won't end up at the top. And that's what ended up happening. I sort of gave up partway through and stopped trying to get to the top, and I didn't end up in the top. That is my civic mirror reflection. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching. One last quick message. If this looks cheap and cheesy, I tried to edit it, but unfortunately, the program I'm using to record this would not allow me to put it in a file type that could be edited, so I had to do it all in one take. I'm sorry if I'm messy, but I tried for about 4 or 5 hours to get it to work. Yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.